Jesse Frasure. We're here at Rock Nation / Rhythm House Studios. Thanks for being here on the Made It in Music podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I love your work, and we were just talking before, one of our mutual favorite podcasts, And the Writer, is by Ross Gull. And can you share with me just what you found encouraging about that, even before we jump into it? Because I think that was so, like, that would speak to a lot of people who listen to this. Like,
we were having a discussion before about, I kind of avoided it. I'm buddies with Joe and Ross, and I love them to death, but I just sort of avoided the podcast just because I felt like in my free time I want to listen to either Serial or music or something industry related. It's kind of like watching a TV show about the music industry. So I sort of just avoided it, but my wife and I were driving back from 30A, and she's like, I want to listen to this. So we just were sort of marathoning it, and I actually found it extremely therapeutic. And it was interesting because, Ross based it on that first hour of a co-write that the writers kind of get together and discuss what's going on, just have fellowship and vent, and you gossip, whatever it is that's happening. And it was interesting listening to heroes of mine and friends of mine and the struggles that they go through in this industry. It's a weird business because we all feel super blessed to be doing this every day. And I think that we're told by society or family members or friends that, oh my gosh, you have the dream job. And we do. But we feel guilty for being stressed out, I think, because of that at times. And it is a strange world, especially when you're doing this for your career and you have a family. And the pressures on, if I'm a normal salesman, if I sell a product, this is how much comes in the door. Well, if I write a song and it fortunately gets cut tomorrow, I have no idea what to project. If it becomes a single, that could make an incredible year 6 months from now, starting to see the money. Or it could be an album cut and not do much anymore. So it's a very strange world of unknown, and I think that adds to a lot of pressure for the creators, specifically the non-single ones with families that have other people kind of relying on them. And we were talking about one little aspect of the podcast that I kind of took with me is they were saying if you write every single day, most of us do, and if you wrote one hit per month, so that's 12 hit singles a year, you would be the greatest songwriter of the year in any genre, any PRO, every single year if you had 12 singles a year. And none of us do that. Even at 12 singles a year, you still would be failing 29, 30 times a month. And like I said, none of us are even hitting 12 singles a year. So that number, for some reason, I thought that was comforting to me, going, oh my gosh, we fail more often than we succeed in this business. And I think we just have to be okay with that. The fun thing is we don't ever know. And the terrible thing is we don't ever know when it's going to be that day. So you just kind of have to show up. And I think that's a good little segue into this.
So good,
it's
man.
The grind.
So let's back up, and I want to talk about what your grind looks like now, but let's back way up. Jesse Frasure, a long time ago. What was your first dollar that you ever made in the business?
My first actual dollar earned in the music business was probably playing in a duo at Michigan State. I was in an acoustic duo with a guy named Joe Nelson. Just me and him just doing acoustic covers at a brewery. Between that and maybe some DJ gigs was probably the earliest dollar earned professionally, not just like, high school shows.
Were you writing songs at that time, or was it kind of just...
Yeah, I actually was, and recording a little bit. I had a Roland, I think it was called an 880 or something. It was like a hardware, basically a digitized
had like 8 faders on it.
Yes.
Yeah, I had this like the same exact thing.
Yep. Yeah. I kind of became a little pro at that thing. But yeah, just dorm room writing and trying to make acoustic pop music at the time.
So what about the whole EDM DJ? So I know that's like, those seem like two polar opposite worlds.
Yeah.
Like how did you get into that?
A buddy of mine had some decks and I just kind of became fascinated by it. And Daft Punk, I I think it was either Discovery or Homework. I can't remember which Daft Punk record. I just was so. I mean, I grew up loving hip hop culture, and I was a child of the 90s. So, 94, 96 hip hop. I'm a Tupac junkie, but I had always loved dance music, and some of the early guys like the Paul Oakenfold and, trance heroes, basically Tiesto or wherever else. So I kind of always just loved that world. And then I ended up DJing more and getting into that scene and kind of creating a little bit, track wise, production wise. And I would take like MP3s and roll off the low end to do my own remixes, which is actually, it's funny because that led to, I'm really comfortable using samples and manipulating samples nowadays. And I one thing that really helped me out in doing that is just making your own remixes from MP3s and going, okay, I want to use this part, but that's got something in it because I don't have the stems of this, Yeah. So there was a blog chart called Hype Machine that I would just do these remixes of like Smooth Criminal or whatever, Coldplay songs, whatever it was at the time. And as soon as something would drop, I would take the MP3 and try to do a remix, and then I would go through the list of Hype Machine bloggers and just email them. I'd make a graphic for it and then email them the remix and try to get charted.
What did you have, like a DJ name at the time?
Telemetry. So, yeah, I mean, same thing. It's one of those things where when you're young, you just kind of think of these stupid band names and you don't really expect people to say Matchbox 20 or Telemetry. Not that Telemetry is at that level, but I didn't really expect it to be something that I would ever use on anything. But cut to many years later, I was fortunate enough to DJ some Cash Money Records parties, and I remember Lil Wayne. It was loud, and he was on stage and had a cigar in his hand, and he was asking me what my DJ name was, and he asked me about 4 times, and then he just said, "Let's hear it for the DJ." Couldn't understand what I was saying. So
it's a great story.
All those young DJs out there, make sure you think about your DJ name and make sure it's easy to pronounce.
Still got time to change it.
Yes, exactly.
Not that you have tons of time to DJ on the side right now. That's a fascinating strategy though, that you were just going through and emailing blogger.
Yeah.
Did one of those end up becoming your big break, or what was
Not really. I mean, I got some attention from it. It was more just like pat on the back. I had a Smooth Criminal remix that reached #1 on Hype Machine, and at the time, I was so kind of really fascinated with the actual industry side. I had just kind of started to discover what publishing was and curious about being a songwriter. So you kind of have a choice. Like, I'm either going to go the Zed or the Calvin route and be an artist DJ, or I was going to pursue the writer business side. And, so I really didn't ever continue to work that artist DJ side as much, just because the industry side sort of took off for me, and I fell in love with publishing here. I'm from Detroit. I moved to Nashville about 17 years ago, and right away I started interning at a small publishing company and started working my way up from a tape copy room. And I didn't listen to any country music, but I respected the writers and I respected the genre, and kind of put writing to the side. Just kind of was intimidated by it. Would DJ on the side. I was doing 10 to 15, 20 fly dates a year doing that, and just doing, never really as an artist DJ. I always just was busy as I was working with these event planners, so I would do these random like parties, and like I did Alyssa Milano's wedding, and then I would go do Cash Money Grammy parties and Drake birthdays, or Kim Zolciak for Housewives of Atlanta's wedding, and just like kind of odd things. But it took me all around the world. So I was in Mexico for New Year's, and Atlantis for 4th of July, and just always traveling. And we would just turn them into vacations. Yeah. So
we being just like family thing.
Me and Stevie. Yeah. I mean, we would just kind of just go see things, and while that was happening, my publishing career was sort of blossoming. So I worked my way up the ranks, and the whole time I really wasn't really focusing on being a songwriter. Well, a few things sort of started to happen. The genre changed. younger country specifically. The genre was changing where you had people like you and I who grew up influenced by a lot of different things were becoming country artists. People were moving to town. Meghan Trainor moved here from Nantucket. She was like 17, and Shay Mooney was signed to T-Pain at the time. He's in a group called Dan and Shay now, but prior to that, he was signed to T-Pain as an R&B artist out of Atlanta. He moved here. My wife introduced me to Chris Stapleton, who was sort of in a frustrated place of signed to a deal, but nothing was really clicking, and nothing was happening yet. So Chris and I would get together in the evenings from the encouragement of both of our wives at the time who were friends, and said, you guys should just kind of fool around and try some stuff together in the studio. So we'd get together and write pop and Motown and soul influenced stuff. Florida Georgia Line asked me to come out and DJ for them on a Nelly run that they were doing in baseball stadiums. And during that tour, I kind of said, look, I'll go do this. Do you guys think you would write with me at some point during this tour? And they were kind of done with their record, so they were like, sure, whatever. They didn't know who I was. But we ended up writing my first number one out there called Sundays. Wow. And so that was happening. And then a song that me and Stapleton wrote, just fooling around, we thought maybe this could be a cool Bruno Mars pitch, and didn't know anything going on. Just we're writing, like I said, pop soul. Thomas Rhett heard the song called Crash and Burn, and that kind of led to my relationship with Thomas. And then Megan and I and Shay wrote a song that Rascal Flatts cut. Somewhere in that mix, Kerry Barlow, one of my writers that was at Major Bob, introduced me to Toby Mac, and he took a chance on me and was cut some sides. Hot Shell Ray was in town, and they were doing some things. So all of this stuff started to bubble up. But the funniest thing to me is that basically writing pop songs and DJing led to me being a country songwriter.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I want to go back to just that moment of going out with Florida Georgia Line to DJ. What was that conversation like? Because you obviously got to put yourself out there as like, hey, I'd like to write with you.
Yeah.
I mean, how did that go? Like,
I was in Seth England's office. Seth and I kind of came up together in the ranks. We're all interns together, and then worked our way up. And obviously he's got an amazing career now, and what an awesome little empire. And but I remember sitting in his office, and he's like, man, I really want you to do this. I think it'd be awesome. And I was like, man, I just don't know if I really want to do like DJing for a country tour. You know, I love the guys and I love it. I just don't know if I want to like get out there and DJ that kind of a scene. And I said, do you think that if I paid to have my own bus one weekend, because I would just ride like the crew bus or video bus or whatever when I was out there normally. But I said, if I paid to have my own bus one weekend, do you think that the boys would try riding with me? And he's like, yeah, I could make that work. And I waited to the very last weekend, and we got a bus. And the first day, pulling out of Nashville, middle of the night, 4:30 a.m., we wake up and we're on the side of the road, broke down. And I remember Sarah Buxton was out with us, and I brought Sarah and Kerry Barlow with me. And I thought, because at the very least, we could write, even if the boys were not in the mood. I remember waking up at 4:30 a.m. and when you're in a bus on an expressway and cars are flying by, you just sort of feel the bus waving, but you know you're not moving. It's a bad situation. So I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm just pissing away $5,000-$6,000. It's about what a bus costs for an entire run, because gas and fuel, and you're putting the driver up in hotels. And so I just was like, this is a huge mistake. We didn't get to the venue until like 3 or 4 o'clock that day. So the whole morning of writing was shot, and I had to go DJ because we were doing these tailgate parties before the show. So I'm just thinking this is just a wash. And, the next day we wake up, we finally get to the venue on time, and, it's like 10 a.m. and we're like, okay, Sarah, do you have Tyler or Brian's phone number? Because I knew the guys cordially out there on the tour, but we weren't buds or anything. And Sarah's like, okay, I'll text them and see if they're in the mood. And basically it was just like, hey, we're gonna write if you guys want to. And I think Seth probably had reached out to him and said, hey, swing by the bus and just, because I remember when Tyler and Brian, Tyler even kind of came on the first time we wrote and was like, I'm going to go for a Harley ride. We're in this gorgeous countryside. It was the middle of the summer. So we can write for a little bit. And they had made some comments like, we've already cut 15 sides for this album. They were done, So that was sort of just a courtesy. And then, the rest was sort of just his. We ended up getting 2 cuts on the record from 2 days of writing. So, you just never really know. I think the moral of that story, in fact, the other song we wrote, that was just an album cut, I thought that was the smash. And I thought Sundays, in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is about, it's fun that we wrote it, but the business mind in my head was going, this is about just getting high and, never going to be a single. Yeah. Sure enough, 3 weeks later, we get a phone call, So you don't know. That's the point. No one knows. This entire business, I don't care if you're Clive Davis, I don't care if you're, Scooter Braun, Jesse Frasure, Seth Mosley, Ashley Gorley, Ryan Tedder. No one truly knows. We know what we like, and you maybe get a little bit of a track record, and that means the track record basically means that your gut seems to be commercially minded, right? What you do naturally seems to translate to someone else, a consumer. But none of us know. Yeah. As soon as you think you do, based on precedent, you're typically wrong, and I guess that's the great part about the music industry.
Man, what a story, though! I just think of so many people like wondering, how do I get in these writing rooms? I mean, you went out and chartered a bus. It sounded like you didn't even know if it was going to pan out or not. Like it was just maybe we'll get to
no for sure because Seth's not going to guarantee anything specifically that late in the game.
Yeah,
and I didn't have enough of a track record. The only track record I had was as a DJ. He could go, hey, he's DJ'd for, at the time, it was Drake, Lil Wayne, Nicki, and all these people that were at Cash Money. So that was a cool little resume as a DJ.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But as a songwriter. Nothing. So you had this whole other career in publishing at Major Bob, and I'd love to talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
Because I'm sure there's just an absolute ton of stuff that you learned. Was that a strategy that you had seen work before, or what made you even think to go, hey, let's rent a bus and bring out some friends and do this thing?
No, I mean, as an independent publisher, you do learn a little bit of a guerrilla warfare mentality, that you're typically slower to get information at a small publishing company. But you were constantly sort of working the rumor mill of going, oh, hey, Julia Michaels is coming to town, or Benny Blanco's in town doing this, or hey, they're listening for Beyonce things over at Sony Publishing. I'm going to see if I can kind of weasel my way into that. And, I always wanted to be someone that kept their word and have integrity. So I never wanted to be a used car salesman as a song plugger or as a writer. But if I believed in something and believed that if I could get in the room and deliver, then at least I'd have a shot at it, And I always heard people say that kind of stuff, like, if I just could get in the room, I'd have a shot. And you always think that sounds so confident. And it's kind of not true. Like, I was super, to this day, I'll go write a song in a half hour here, and I'll be worried about it. And I'll be with people I know or people I don't know. It doesn't matter. And, I'm fortunate enough to have songs on the charts right now, and yet still I'm sort of a nervous wreck every time we write. Just because you want it to go well. You want it to be enjoyable. We've all been in those fortunately few writes where you're like, oh my God, get me out of here. This is hitting a wall. But yeah, I think you do learn in a small company, the toilet's not working. Someone's got to fix it. You do work that, what pays the bills and what doesn't pay the bills. We need to get activity. We need songs out. We need writers that are being sought after, So all those things kind of go into play when you're like, okay, if you can work an angle. As long as you can kind of keep your integrity while you're doing it, then it's a sales business.
Yeah. So good. So how did you learn that side of the skill, like that skill set? Because a lot of people, when they get into music, do not think of the word sales as being associated with it. But I'm actually really glad you hit on that, because that's everything.
Oh, it's all it is.
Like, how did you learn that?
I really think just coming up through the ranks of a small publishing company, like I said, where you're aware of the budget, you learn, oh, wow, a platinum record only makes that much money, or this single made that much money. And also sitting in rooms with other song pluggers and you thinking you have some badass material, and then you sit in a plugger meeting and they smoke you. And then you start to go, wow, there's a lot of amazing songs being written every single day in just this town, let alone the world. Which also makes you down the road, makes you frustrated when people put out shitty albums, your favorite artist, and you're like, what? How is that possible?
How is it? I'm listening to amazing songs all day, every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think, once you start to realize, okay, everyone's pretty good, and there's a few that are great on a regular basis, then you really have to start hustling.
Yeah.
I think it's like any line of work. I mean, if we were stockbrokers, we'd be doing the same thing. Everyone has the same information, or has the ability to gather the same information. Somehow we have to get ahead, So I always felt like my writers, wherever I was, I wanted them to feel like they had a ton of attention. We weren't oversigning. It wasn't like a, huge stable of writers. But also I wanted them to know that I get black and blued over their songs. I would get, beat up, told that they were terrible or this, that, or the other, and just kind of break down the walls trying to get a song heard. And some songs I've had cut, whether it was a song player or a writer, the artist passed on them the first time around. Because they're just humans. I mean, sometimes you hear a song and doesn't react, and then the second time you hear it, next thing you know, it's a single. So once you've seen that happen and you realize, wow, what it takes to do this, you realize that the majority of this business, when I say this business, right now talking specifically about writing and publishing, the majority happens outside of the writing room. I'm not going to say the easy part, because it's not easy to write songs and there's a lot of stresses that come with it. But, not every song just finds its way. Yeah, it all begins with the song. We say that a lot in this town. And that means what it means. It begins with the song. The amount that has to go down to get a song cut, and whether it's production or, concerns an artist has. Is this the next single? Yeah. Is this going to help my career, hurt my career? Is this a risk? There's just so much that goes into it, and we can only control so much, so you might as well control what you can control.
Yeah. So at some point, your success with FGL and Toby Mac and Rascal Flatts and Thomas Rhett turned into you being able to start your own thing. What was the transition from you leaving Major Bob, because you were doing creative over there, right? Was that your
I worked
there?
Up to the VP role over there, and I was proud of the spot. We had helped kind of rebrand it. Major Bob was sort of famous for having Garth Brooks, and then there was another writer over there named Neil Thrasher that was big for. He's still an amazing songwriter. So, but we had brought in this kind of new crew that had topped the charts a few times, and we had rebranded the company, everything from logos to just the vibe in general. So I was proud of that. And my writing career was really just starting to blossom. But my professional career had sort of hit the ceiling of like, look, it was sort of a family company. Equity was never discussed. And I just feel like once you've tapped out in any situation, if you're not growing, if you're no longer nervous, if you're no longer rattled, something's wrong. That's sometimes when bitterness sets in. I think anyone that that's jaded about the business or any business, whether that's watching your parents get disenchanted with their careers when you're kids or, us. Once you start standing still, bitterness, jadedness, and especially for a writer and anyone in the music business, being jaded really blinds you to young talent, new sounds. I mean, we've all been around writers that are just over it and, hate on everything. And man, that's the moment. That's just like the death nail. So I always feel like if you're really comfortable and you haven't been scared in a little while, whether you're a writer or a business person, you might need to do a little bit of a gut check on, am I doing what I should be doing?
So did you have a moment in time that happened for you and you're like, man, I got to go start my own thing now? I
had about a year and a half. I had been approached several times for about, fortunately, I had made a little bit of a name for myself, I think, as a reputation of being a decent business person. So there was a few people and some early believers in me on production stuff. Guys like Jim Catino gave me like some early production shots, but Scott Borchetta was a guy that kind of came wanting me to come work for him several times, and I could never really find the combination of how it would work. But just the fact that he was kind of persistent was a huge confidence builder. I mean, I have so much respect for him even till this day. But just him sort of reaching out and being pretty persistent about it, I was like, man, maybe I do have a greater value than I kind of thought. So those kind of things start going, well, what if? And then it was just a matter of, it's challenging sometimes. You're when you're in a spot of, well, what do you want to do? And you're in a spot where it's sort of a lot of freedom. That's a hard question. You're like, well, I kind of want to do what I'm doing, but just bigger and different opportunities. And one thing I really wanted was partners that I could reach out to and pick up the phone at any given moment. Like Thursday and Friday, for instance, here we were having a sync day where the four of us are just hunkered down and focusing on providing some sync stuff for our chapel partners. And at any given moment, I can reach up and pick up the phone, call Jay Brown and Tamara at Rock and send a song there. I can call, Katie Walliver at Chapel and reach out and send a song there. I can call Ben Vaughn or BJ's team at Chapel locally and talk to them. I love having partners now, as far as like, no one's going to work as hard as we do. No one's going to believe in us as much as we do as far as work ethic. So you can't rely on partners, but I like having partners. And I think that's one thing I learned through some different deals in life is going, look, I want a deal that enables me and provides me with other outlets, but it doesn't rely on them doing their part for me to succeed, if that makes any sense.
Makes total sense. Man, we could hit on that forever, but I know you're busy man, probably got to write the next FGL hit or something.
Or the next failure of my month. You never know.
Or that's a good point.
But you got to get it out, right?
Yeah. But let's go through our last 5 questions, full circle 5. Number 1, what book or record do you most commonly recommend to people?
Man, one thing that I tell every young writer that I meet with, I ask if they read, and if they don't, I tell them to read. And I wish I listened to that more. I'm a terrible reader. I read maybe, if I'm lucky, 2 books a year. It's terrible. I just read Shoe Dog. I'm a huge sneakerhead, but the Nike story has always been fascinating to me. So I just recently read that. I love Ready Player One because I'm a 80s nostalgia junkie. So I'm the worst person to ask for book recommendations. Those are my 2 recent favorites.
So Shoe Dog?
Shoe Dog's pretty great. It ends a little abruptly. Like I wish he kind of continued the story along, but basically it's pretty amazing that Nike is even alive today. It's just a crazy story. Yeah. Elon Musk's autobiography is great, or biography. Music, album-wise, I mean, the albums that shaped me are Thriller, All Eyes on Me, The Chronic, Discovery, Daft Punk, Coldplay's first record. Yeah. I love Pink Floyd. I love anything Smokey Robinson, Motown in general.
Good. Yeah, good recommendations.
Thanks, bud.
So we've talked a little bit about this, but failure can turn into actually a great thing if it changes your behavior or perspective on how you carry yourself forward.
Sure.
So in that sense, thinking back over your career, do you have a favorite failure moment?
A favorite failure moment. Man, it's funny. As soon as you say failure, I think of multiple things come to mind. Without getting into like too many details and calling anyone out and name who I still am colleagues with, there's definitely situations that you get into as a young writer where you don't expect if you're a remotely humble person and you can be arrogant a little bit too and still have some sense of some humility, no one really expects that you're going to write. You just don't go, I'm going to write a number one song. You can be confident and want to, and you can dream about it, but you can never see yourself doing that. So if you're going to do situations, and it kind of goes back to what I said and learning some lessons and deals about, anything you do in the music business or any business in life, make sure that the deals are structured to enable you to win, but you're not relying on someone else to do something for you to win. Because there's no brick walls in this business. There's no publishing deal that you're going to sign that's going to end your career or management deal. But there's definitely ones that will linger on, whether that's expenses for your family or commissions or whatever else that will linger on for a while. So, I think the two failures that come to mind are early on in my career, intern-wise, kind of speaking out of turn and sort of not feeling like I knew a subject and not really being totally aware of it. Research everything before you have an opinion on it. That goes for everything in life. I think if it's politics, I really don't care which way you swing, but the bottom line is, we are in a world of cliff note commenters. People know this much of a subject and then have an opinion about it. So I think that goes for anything in the music business. And then the same thing goes for some of my worst business ventures, have shaped me into what I hope is a better business person today.
It's good. So before you dove fully into doing music, was there anything that held you back or kept you from just being all in on it?
Fortunately, I was one of the blessed ones. I think by 12 or 13, I knew I wanted to be in music, and I never truly had the passion. Like I said, even DJing, there was never really that drive to be an artist. Even when I was in bands, I'd never really wanted to be a famous artist. I wanted to work I remember going through high school counselor guidebooks and being like, oh, MTV internship. Because when you're a kid, you don't know how the hell to get in the music industry. So I was pretty driven by that aspect and kind of knew what I wanted to do. Basically, I think that you sort of find your way as far as, your passions for whatever hits you. But I always just wanted to do music. There was not this other force in my life of going, maybe you could do that. I had pretty supportive parents too. I think my mom was nervous about it. My dad grew up playing in bar bands, and she just basically, the outside world, I call it the civilian world, non-music industry people are called civilians in my book. The civilian world doesn't really have an understanding of music outside of what they're around. They still think we sell songs, So in her mind, it was, you're going to grow up playing in bars. So I think she was a little nervous, but they never were non-supportive. So I was fortunate enough to know that, and I knew I needed to get to a music industry town. Yeah. I liked Nashville. I didn't listen to country music, but I liked Nashville. And it seemed more accessible community-wise. I could go to a writer night or a show easier than I could in LA. And I liked the community. And now it's home. I mean, I would never, ever live anywhere else.
It's good. Well, what is something that's working for you right now? Maybe as a writer or just as a company. What are some of the things that are working?
The things that seem to work for me consistently from day one to today is being very careful. One thing that can happen when you get a little bit of success is you start business writing. And make sure that your calendar doesn't ever get too full of business rights. In other words, make sure that everyone you're writing with, you got to like their hits. Yeah. If just because they're a hit writer and you don't really gravitate to that music, you got to be careful that you don't just sort of slide into that, because what got me into this was not chasing something. And that sounds like one of those things that people say. It's kind of like when your grandparent or dad gives you advice, and you're like, yeah. I got it. But you don't really understand that until you get caught up in the moment going, what am I doing this for? So I'm really careful to, like, whether it's making tracks in advance or writing songs, I'm very careful not to vanilla something down because I think it's going to be too left of center, or country something up because I think it's going to be too pop, or I try to let the town and someone else tell me something. Maybe the label will call me and say, hey, this needs to be more country, or this needs to be less this, or this needs to be more hip hop. But I think if you start doing that to yourself, then you're editing yourself, So I got into country music by not writing country music. So why all of a sudden do I need to change what I do, So I love influences. I love kind of writing in different eras and styles of music. I think that we went through this is getting a little long-winded, I apologize, but I think we went through a weird little era post Blurred Lines cases where you could no longer be influenced and talk about your influences. Meanwhile, all of our heroes, from Mick Jagger to the Beatles to anyone you could ever name, Elvis, was influenced greatly and transparently so in many of these cases. I mean, can you imagine the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin without blues influences,
right,
that they've mentioned? Yeah. So I think that we had this slippery slope happen where all of a sudden you have to feel ashamed, or you have people chasing down situations because of influence. I mean, I feel like, there's really truly nothing new that's ever made. There's unique twists on it,
It's good. So last question. If you woke up tomorrow and all of this stuff just disappeared, the business collapsed, and you had to start from square one, but you have all the relationships and the experience that you still have, and you could do anything you want, where would you start?
Any business?
Could be music, could be anything.
I mean, it just depends. I love fashion and clothes and shoes. So I've always been, that would probably be my only other passion where I could see myself getting into some other game of life. I've always been intrigued by that world. If I was starting from zero in this business today, man, what an amazing community in this town now for writer producers. When I was coming up, there's a website called Gear Sluts, and I remember being like, how does Ryan Tedder get his snare drum sound? And, like the idea of the kid that we just signed down the hall, Brandon Day, I just gave him a hard drive full of samples. And it's not like I'm a Dr. Luke or a Ryan Tedder or anything to him. It's just, can you imagine if we started off and there was someone that could like take you under their wing and help you out? Writer producers or track guys or whatever you want to call them in this town were like, I remember explaining, an attorney I talked to didn't even understand why we were getting writing credit. It was such a foreign subject 7 years ago, and now it's like every publishing company's got multiple. So,
right.
What an amazing time to start in this business and in this town. These amazing writers come through. Some of our favorite pop writers are buying homes here, and working and collaborating with us and vice versa. So I think I would focus on, if you can know what you know now, starting off from zero, you got to have a brand. If your tracks don't stand out, they just sound great, I'm not interested. I want to hear something unique. I want to hear a unique take on things, as does every single artist out there. If you don't have a unique approach that's still commercial, then it's hard to brand. I think you need to not be too cool for school, be open-minded. If you want to be a commercial songwriter, there is a difference between an artist songwriter and a commercial songwriter. But if you want to have commercial success, and I don't care if that means in trap or EDM or pop or country, if you want commercial success, you have to stay open-minded. You have to be your own quarterback, but always remember to listen to a team. And you kind of just, like I said, you have to figure out, how do I stand out? You know, and that you don't have to be the best guy in town. Sometimes that's just the hardest worker.
Yeah, it's good. Is there anything you're working on right now that you'd like to share?
Oh man, all kinds of stuff. I'm proud of Rhythm House. Our partners at Rock Nation have been awesome. We just, Carrie and Stephen Lee Olson and Carrie Barlow just got back from a Nick Jonas retreat with them. We've got 4 songs in the top 40 this week, which
Amazing.
is awesome for our small little roster. We've got Thomas Rhett's Life Changes and Lady Antebellum's Heartbreak. Carrie and I just co-wrote Summer Fever for Little Big Town, which I co-produced with Shane McNally.
Yeah, so good.
Working with Billy Currington and all kinds of stuff, man. So we're just excited. We jump genres. We're like ADD, genre-less music creation.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been fun.
I love it, man. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. And can people find you on social media?
I'm just Telemitry on Instagram. We have a Rhythm House Music Instagram page as well. And then hopefully you'll hear the songs on the radio.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.